Okay, it's recording. Okay, we're going.
Hello, my name is Capricia.
I'm Perry.
Our vigilant that we're doing is the supervisor, and the framework that we've chosen is Model 1 Ethics Framework. Um, so the vigilant we chose was the supervisor. You work in a treatment center for mothers who have different addictions. The children are part of the treatment process. Staying with them is in an inpatient setting where individual, family, and group therapy are part of the program. As a children's counselor, you are responsible for individual and family therapy with children. You are a parent of 3 children. Your supervisor is not a parent. One of the mandates of the program is that clients are to supervise their children 24/7. If a child is found not supervised, the parent will receive consequences. Your client is from a country in Africa. She has 2 children, 5 and 7. Her perspective on parenting is communal. She is continuously being given consequences for her children not being supervised. So on my end, ethics with the E, evaluate relevant personal, societal, agency, client, and professional values. The client is from another country where her perspective parenting is communal. So the supervisor should be aware of how the client's attitude or her view on parenting is and or her cultural upbringing. However, the client can also learn how to supervise her children. We're in the treatment process with the help of the counselor and supervisor, as the treatment process mandates the client need to supervise her children 24/7. The supervisor and counselor are putting the client's well-being first, as they are helping the mother with her addiction, as supervising her children 24/7 is part of that treatment. T, think about what ethical standards of the NASW Code of Ethics applies, as well as relevant laws and case decisions. The ethical standards of the NASW Code of Ethics, which applies, is 1.01 commitment to clients, which states social workers' primary responsibility is to promote the well-being of their clients. In general, the client's interests are primary. H, hypothesize about possible consequences of different decisions. Possible consequences would be that the supervisor did not take awareness to the mother's culture of parenting, and the counselor witnessing the supervisor ignoring the client's cultural upbringing. I, identify who will benefit and who will be harmed in view of social work's commitment to the most vulnerable. The mother will benefit from the treatment, as well as the children, because she will be able to beat her addiction and learn how to supervise her children, where the supervisor and counselor will be harmed for giving consequences to a mother for not understanding how to supervise her children and ignoring the client's cultural upbringing of communal parenting. In that sense, with communal parenting, in her upbringing, she feels like as it's a community that helps raise her children. It doesn't necessarily mean the whole community's supervising her children. It could be a figure of speech. But with this treatment process, it's, even though her upbringing, it's a perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean it's like really her culture. However, with the treatment, she's, in order to do the treatment, you have to supervise your children. So it's a social worker's responsibility to make sure that their client is being well taken care of and helping her beat her addiction. And with beating her addiction, with the treatment process, is supervising her children. With that being said, although she's from Africa, it's a perspective, not really a cultural thing. But like I said, it can be a cultural upbringing if that's how she identifies, but it doesn't hurt to learn how to supervise. So it's not technically they're ignoring her upbringings of cultural, but they're also saying like, hey, this is a treatment commitment, a treatment process. Um, in order to take this treatment, you have to supervise your children 24/7. Um, so it could go both ways. That one's kind of tricky. Um, but with the C, consult with supervisor and colleagues about the most ethical choice. The supervisor and counselor should consult with the higher up if at a crossroad with ignoring the mother's culture to promote her well-being, to beat her addiction, or to take in account that her culture and not be successful with beating the addiction. And that concludes my argument.
Okay, thank you. Very good. And I do agree with a lot of that. So my opinion is, according to the NASW Code of Ethics on Supervision, social work supervisors should adhere to the NASW standards for cultural competence in social work practice and have specialized knowledge and understanding about the culture of the client population served by the supervisor. Supervisors should be able to communicate information about diverse clients, client groups to supervisees and help them to use appropriate methodological approaches, skills, and techniques that reflect their understanding of the role of culture in the helping process. The client is from a country in Africa that practices different parenting practices, but the agency's ideas of what is appropriate. However, punitive actions are taken because of the client's social norms and culture. Punishing a client for practicing their cultural beliefs is a bad practice, in my opinion, and should probably be addressed by the supervisor's supervisor. Furthermore, 3.01b in the NASW states social workers who provide supervision or consultation are responsible for setting clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries. Standard 1 in ethics and values, social workers shall function in accordance with the values, ethics, and standards of the NASW Code of Ethics. Cultural competence requires self-awareness, cultural humility, and a commitment to understanding and embracing culture as central to effective practice. The client is following what is normal and expected for a mother in her culture, and it is the social worker's job to understand and become educated about the cultural norms of the client, and not the other way around, I think. The supervisor is not letting the worker meet the client where they are in order to create a therapeutic bond, and this could make rapport hard. It would be hard to have a client trust the worker, and it doesn't show empathy, which are key values that social workers need to display. This could also cause the client and client's children in the vignette harm. Standard 3 in the NASW Code of Ethics for cultural competency states, cross-cultural knowledge social workers shall possess and continue to develop specialized knowledge and understanding that is inclusive of, but not limited to, the history, traditions, values, family systems, and artistic expressions such as race and ethnicity, immigration and refugee status, tribal groups, religion and spirituality, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. In the vignette, the supervisor is punishing the client with consequences for her culture, or for her culture's parenting practices. And the NASW states it's vital to maintain or improve the quality of culturally competent services. So using the ethic framework, in evaluating the relevant personal, society, agency, client, and professional values, the supervisor is not recognizing her possible bias regarding this woman's culture, and her right to raise her children the way she was raised in her communal fashion. And key to think about the ethical standards, I think it applies, it's 3.01b, that states social workers who provide supervision or consultation are responsible for setting clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries. In H, if I was to hypothesize about possible consequences, I think some of the consequences are the failure of the supervisor to demonstrate cultural competency, and the social worker not learning a key work standard because of poor supervision. In I, and identify who will benefit and who will be harmed. I think the children could be harmed, depending on what the circumstances are behind the consequences, like if the client is put out of the program because of the program policies. And I do know it's important to have policies and standards in treatment and programs, but I just think being culturally competent is vital to making that good connection. And then with C, I agree 100% with Capricia, where she says consult with the supervisor. I think always that's the one thing that's vital, that we could always we consult with the supervisor and colleagues about the most ethical choice. And I would imagine that the worker would have to go to the supervisor's supervisor to seek supervision in this case. That's kind of a mouthful, but that's what I think. So, but I do agree with both sides. I have to be honest that I agree also with your argument on this for sure. So that's all I have.
I just noticed this one was it was tricky.
Yeah.
It was tricky because it's like, okay, culture, treatment process.
Right.
Policy of this treatment process. So in order to do this treatment process, this is the guidelines. Right. But then we got culture.
Right.
So it's like it's very tricky. And like I was saying, do we go with culture and not kick the addiction that she has?
Right.
Or do we kick the addiction for her well-being and ignore the culture?
Right.
Like, it's a crossroad.
Well, hopefully there could be both, right? Hopefully there could be both. But great, and I agree. So do you want to add anything?
No, I think that concludes it. What I learned was, are we doing the client more harm than good?
Right.
I look at what is it. So is it harmful if we ignore her culture and help her with her treatment, her addiction, or is it helpful? So it's like,
or could we push her away by not, like, she might not engage in treatment because she doesn't feel trusted because she can't display
do her practice.
Right. So I mean, it's like, it is a good ethical dilemma on this, I think, for sure. And then sometimes there is no right or wrong. It's just which one will cause the least amount of harm. And I think on both sides, I think you make a great point, and I think I do too.
Yeah, you made it. I agree. Like I agree completely. Learning where her culture is and how she was raised and what her perspective is. If this is what her norm is, then it's like we have to respect that.
Right.
But then it's like, okay, we'll respect that, but then you're not going to benefit from the treatment that we're trying to implement with you and kick your addiction to benefit for the children. Maybe it'll help her as well as the children to be able to supervise her children, and her children won't run places, like run amok, because now the mother has that skill to supervise her children and not depend on a community, because we all have different communities. We can't always trust the people in our community. So it's a different a different environment.
You have kids too, so I hear you on that. So
Right. I have children, and will I say I trust my community to watch my kids? No.
true.
So it's like I have to supervise my children for
Right.
myself. But I grew up with the saying of it takes a village to raise a child.
Right.
And that's just a figure of speech, because when we say it takes a village to raise a child, we're talking about the teacher
Right.
that's teaching our children, our church who's mentoring our children, or like neighbors that a family.
Mhm.
It takes a village. So that's what we say when it takes a village to raise our children. We don't necessarily mean our community is raising our children.
Right on cue.
So, like I said, it could go both ways.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It was nice working with you. I'm going to go ahead and pause.
Okay.
Get back to your kids.
Yeah, you can hear them in the background. All right.
Bye.
Thank you.